What is impact analysis? Impact analysis is the systematic process of identifying which systems, business processes, data elements, and stakeholders will be affected by a proposed change before implementation. So, in short, impact analysis is what is the change and how change would be impacting various system and processes of the product that we are creating. So, the process, how we can assess the impacts through our system is firstly, we need to understand the change and document it. Then we need to identify the affected areas, such as whether it is affecting the user interface, backend, APIs, or other business processes and data fields. Then we need to analyze the dependency, meaning the upstream and downstream systems, such as reports and integrations. Then we need to check whether it is affecting business rules or not. So, any logic change, including the underwriting rules, claim processing, we need to check those whether it will be impacting them or not. Assess risk and effort. Then we need to assess the effort for this change and potential issues and implementation effort. Then we need to validate with the stakeholders where we will be discussing our finding with them and confirming complete scope understanding. Let's take an example. Let's suppose the change is the if the age is greater than 60, then the premium would be increased by 20%. So the areas or processes that would be impacted would be the policy issuance system, premium calculation logic, UI changes, and report and analytics adjustments. Why do we need to evaluate all these changes? Because it will prevent system failures, avoid missed dependencies, ensures smooth implementation. What is stakeholder management? Effective stakeholder management meaning maintaining clear communication, aligning expectation, and ensuring requirements are accurately captured and delivered across all parties involved. So, in short, stakeholder management meaning understanding the needs or expectation of the stakeholders, aligning with the deliverables, and resolving the conflicts with the stakeholders. The stakeholder management framework starts with identifying the stakeholders, then understanding their needs, meaning understanding their priorities and pain points from each stakeholder. Maintain regular communication, such as providing them with status updates, validating requirements. So, confirming understanding with stakeholders and obtain approvals before development begins. Then manage expectation. We need to be clear about the timelines and we need to highlight risk and dependencies with them. Then resolving conflicts. Handle different stakeholder views and align everyone towards a common goal. Let's take an example. If from the business team wants faster claim processing to improve customer satisfaction, but the claim processing would probably take some time, right? It involves various steps. It cannot be done so quickly. So tech team is saying that the system limitation may prevent immediate improvements. So as a business analyst, how should we communicate to the higher management or the stakeholders involved in this? Firstly, we need to understand the technical constraint in this manner. Then we need to identify the business priorities, that meaning how much important it is. Then we need to suggest the feasible phase solution. And finally, we need to communicate with the stakeholders so that they are aligned and explaining the reasons for it. What is requirements traceability? Linking each requirement across the entire life cycle from initial requirement through development, testing, and delivery. Why do we do this? To ensure end-to-end visibility and that nothing is missed during implementation and validation. So traceability implementation process includes assigning unique IDs, use traceability metrics, link in tools, track the changes, and validate coverage. Let's take an example. The requirement is system should validate policy before claim processing. Firstly, we'll create the user story and we need to track it. That is the requirement phase. Then we need to create up a development task and we need to connect that user story with the development task, implementation of validation API. Then we need to create up a test case and we need to map it to the user story and development task. That is validating valid policy versus invalid policy scenarios. Why do we need to map the user story, development tasks, and test cases? So that no requirement is missed, ensures complete testing coverage, critical for audits and compliance.